Hello everyone. Today I wanted to continue on in my journey through the available filmography of the Japanese director Masaki Kobayashi. Talk a little bit about his 1963 movie Kwaidan. Uh, Kwaidan is a film that is taken from a series of folk tales that were collected by an English or an American writer named Lafcadio Hearn, and he lived in Japan. He collected folk tales. He married a Japanese woman, and she translated many of these folk tales. The title Kaidan translates as eerie stories, uncanny stories, and but basically they're ghost stories. Now, in saying that, I would warn that anybody who's looking for what is considered to be a Japanese horror film nowadays, Kaidan is definitely not that. It's a story that's more kind of existential terror than it is any kind of gory film. The scariness of the ghosts is that they appear to be normal, but they're all seeking vengeance of some kind. And that sort of ties the four stories together. The first and the last are a little bit shorter. The second and third stories are really the meat of the movie. The first story sort of gets you in the mood. The last story is, for Kobayashi, rather comical. Humor not one of Kobayashi's normal attributes. And there's no moral to any of these stories. These aren't moral tales. They're not psychological tales. Kobayashi's intent was to illustrate a dimension that is beyond what we can see. And this ties in very much to Kobayashi's work as a whole, as kind of a spiritual world that he believes we occasionally have the pleasure or the horror of catching sight of sometimes in our lives. And Kobayashi's style here is very artificial. It's Harikiri, his previous film, he had sort of left naturalism, realism behind a bit, becoming more expressionistic. And he really amps that up. And this Kaidan is Kobayashi's first color film, and boy, he pulls out all the stops in this movie as far as the color goes and the whole look of the film. And Kobayashi had been a art student in a very prestigious Tokyo college before World War II, but the war sort of put a crimp in his plans. So when he when he was finally released, I think in '46, he was kept on as a prisoner. A year after the conflict ended, he went to Shoshiko Studios to work as an intern for Keisuke Kinoshita. So, but Kwaidan really plays into Kobayashi's intense love of Japanese art, which is two-dimensional. So it looks different than we would normally see in the West, where we like, or we're used to depth and a three-dimensional kind of look to art. Classical Japanese art was two-dimensional. It values surface over depth. So that's why we don't get any real deep message to any of these four tales. But boy, is this movie beautiful. I mean, it is absolutely gorgeous. Its aesthetic dimension is just off the charts, and especially in the Snow Lady sequence, which is the second one, and Tetsuya Nakadai stars in that. I believe he's the narrator of this. Sure sounds like his voice, but I don't see anywhere unless I missed it. And then Keiko Kisho, who was the actress in The Inheritance. I think I got her name wrong, but she's a terrific actress, and she was in The Inheritance, which was an earlier a fantastic performance in that film. So it's beautiful. It's just overwhelmingly beautiful. The snow scenes in that sequence are fantastic, and but it's a slow moving movie as well. It's a crafted movie. Everything adds to the story. Every prop, every camera movement. It might be taken best in parts. I think it's fair to say that the aesthetic quality of Kwaidan is so overwhelming. It might be because it's a 3-hour movie, but it's a one-of-a-kind experience. And for Kobayashi particularly, because Harakiri had been his breakout movie to the movie world, so his prestige was high, and he did this kind of once-in-a-lifetime, huge budget movie where he put so much of his love of classic Japanese art into it. And this is another movie he's working with Toru Takamitsu, the great Japanese composer, who composed many film scores for many different people, different directors, Japanese directors, sort of a disciple of John Cage. It's a soundscape just like in Harakiri, but again, just as the beauty, the expressionist of beauty, black and white in Harakiri, color in Kwaidan, Takamitsu just plays it to the hilt, and which isn't to say it's over-orchestrated. It's not really. He's using the biwa, which is a kind of lute that he reintroduced to Japanese movies in Harakiri, but he also uses silence. He doesn't. There are times when you see people making noise, but you don't hear what the sounds, and then the sounds sometimes seem to be kind of not tonally consistent with what we're seeing, but it really amps up the feeling of kind of that existential kind of horror that the film really is so adept at producing. So then in the supplements we get another segment of Shinoda's, another great Japanese director's interview with Kobayashi, in which he talks quite a bit. Kobayashi gets to talk a bit in this segment of that interview, and how the production was running out of money. It was so expensive. The sets were just enormous. He couldn't finish the film, and his production company was basically in charge of the movie, and they ran out of money, and he had to go to Kinoshita, his longtime mentor, for money, and Kinoshita came through, gave him all the money he needed to finish the movie. And then he wanted to take it to Cannes again. He had got second place the previous year with Harakiri, but they didn't want anything more than a 2-hour movie, so he had to cut it down. He cut it down. It's 180 minutes. And we get the original Kobayashi cut on this Blu-ray, Criterion Blu-ray. He cut it down to about 160 minutes. That wasn't good enough for Cannes, so he just took out the Lady in the Snow segment, which might be the best segment certainly the most gorgeous segment in the film. He took that out, and that was in 1965. Kwaidan came to the U.S. Was released in the U.S., and that was the 2-hour version. Was what was released here, and Kobayashi, when he went back to Shoshiko, because this movie Kwaidan was released by Toho, and where he was a contract director, from the time right after the war, they let him go. They fired him. He now had a reputation of being he was spending too much money. It's the kind of movie. Kwaidan is the kind of movie. I'd made a video on Heaven's Gate recently, where Michael Cimino, because of the great success of The Deer Hunter, kind of did the same thing, where he really went crazy with spending money on a movie, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for a director with these kind of visual ambitions. And we get interview with one of the assistant directors, and this is pretty good because he described some of Kobayashi's methods and how difficult the filming was. They had the lighting in particular, where the ceilings were so high, and they had to get all this overhead lighting in place, and the technical crew, they didn't want to go up that high, so they had a whole build scaffolding that was just tremendously expensive. But he also points out how free Kobayashi left his fellow craftsmen to come up with their own ideas and their own creative ideas. Then we get a commentary with Stephen Prince. For those of you who've seen some of my other videos on Kobayashi, you know I'm following along with Stephen Prince's book, A Dream of Resistance, which is a great book on Kobayashi's films. And he gives the commentary here. And this is a 3-hour commentary. So, but, you know, luckily, or, you know, at least from Prince's point of view, you have 4 different storylines that are very different from one another. So he's making 4 commentaries. And he's so good at showing us the visual techniques that Kobayashi did, his high angle shots, his camera movements. And he draws in, because Kobayashi's previous movies were so much a part of his reaction to his experiences in World War II, but it's in there. It's in this movie too, even though these are ghost stories set in the past. And then we get a foldout, and this is the foldout in the Criterion edition. Doesn't really give you too much of a sense of what the movie looks like. This is kind of like from the credits, and it's used again. This is sort of like some sort of chemical weaving its way through water, and we get but it doesn't give you a real sense of the colorfulness of Kwaidan, and really. And then we get a Jeffrey O'Brien essay on the other side. And it's very good. It's a very good essay, and I just wanted to read one really brief sentence from O'Brien's essay, where he talks about the beauty of Kwaidan, and he says that in this film, beauty is not a decoration, but a direct link to unknown and perilous realms, which really is. In a nutshell, is really what Kwaidan is. Like I say, it's a one-of-a-kind movie. You can take, since it's 4 parts, you can take it in sections. You don't have to watch it straight through in the comfort of your home theater. So next up is Samurai Rebellion, and as I said, Kobayashi was let go by Shishiko, so he was an independent director for hire, and Toshiro Mifune had formed a production company. He hired him to do Samurai Rebellion, which, as it turns out, I'm anxious to see, because Mifune and his image of his self-image for his production company, at least, was of this great warrior who has got fantastical skills, where he can kill 50, 100, doesn't matter how many samurai warriors come up against him. This was very, very different as a contrast to what Kobayashi thought about what determines what heroism is. Okay, so I hope I wrap this one up. As always, thanks a lot for everybody who stuck around, listened to me. I appreciate it. You guys take care. Catch you next time.